I'd now like to introduce our keynote speaker for Programmable 2024, Scott Shaw, the Head of Technology for ThoughtWorks in Australia.
I'm glad to see we have the security zone here, so it's no bum rushing the stage or anything, and I'm safe. So I've been around, as you can tell from, I think that was my LinkedIn bio. I actually, the one in the program I wrote, I had ChatGPT write. It got almost everything right, except it thought that I played golf, so I had to change that part. I see a lot of familiar faces, and if you know me, you might be saying, Scott, are you still talking about platforms? Why are we still talking about platforms? This is, I think I gave my first platform talk in 2016 in this well, it was actually the other room. It was the room I started out in, pretty sure. It was a CIO conference, and actually the ThoughtWorks marketing people forbade me from using this image. So I'm really happy I got the chance to use this. I just really like this image. It's really the only reason I have this slide. But I wanted to make the point that we've been doing this for a long time. We've been talking about platforms. So why are we talking about this now? Well, one thing is Gartner. So, because we do what Gartner says. And Gartner has, for the last 2 years, had platform engineering on their, as one of their top 10 technology trends. And they have the definition, they have a nice definition there of what platform engineering is, a curated set of tools, packaged for easy consumption for developers and end users. But it will increase the productivity and reduce the burden of development teams. So that's there, and I thought that's a pretty good definition because it sounds just like this one. Evan Bottcher from last year, you might know him. This is the one, if you actually look up what a digital platform is, if you Google it, this is the one you will probably see. And this is the one that was in the Team Topologies book, a quote that went in the Team Topologies book that's been used strikingly similar to the Gartner one. Foundation, APIs, tools, services, support, compelling internal product, that's really important. And teams can make use of it at a higher pace to deliver at a higher pace with reduced coordination required. So anyway, that's what we're talking about with platforms. It's a very ambiguous word. So why are we, so there's been resurgence of interest. I think there has been a gathering interest in platform engineering over the last 8 years. And we have been talking about it also on the Tech Radar. So one of the things I do is I'm one of the authors of the ThoughtWorks Tech Radar. And this is one of the longest running blips on the radar that we have had. So we first did that in November 2017, talking about applying product management to internal platforms, or platforms as a product, right? But people didn't really, so we kept it on because we thought it deserved more attention in 2018. In 2020, we felt like we needed to reiterate that because we kept seeing that people were building platforms and they weren't actually embracing this idea of platform as a product. And as recently as a year ago, we blipped it again because we see that when people approach it as a product, they are successful, and when they just throw stuff out there without thinking of it in terms of a product, it's not successful. And so, but I'm starting to think people aren't listening, or we're not explaining it very well. And maybe we need to talk about it in different terms. So I'm not going to refer back to that platform as a product stuff, which you may be relieved to know since I've given that talk before. But I do want to kind of look at where we've been and where we are now and what we've learned, because ThoughtWorks, we've done a lot. We've been doing a lot of this stuff. So I want to kind of look at the evolution of platform engineering over the time and look at what we've learned today and a little glimpse, hopefully, if we've got time, to talk about where I think things might be going in the future. So here's one view of the evolution. So I was at some DevOps conferences, and I noticed that there is this thing where the same people who were logging into computers or clicking and pointing in the console in the 2000s, around the 2010s started rebranding themselves as DevOps, right? So you got your DevOps team, which is an anti-pattern. And but they're writing some scripts now, you know, and they're starting to automate some things for themselves. to make their jobs easier. And now that the 2020s have rolled around, I noticed that these same people have rebranded themselves now as platform engineers. So this is kind of a cynical, dystopian view of what platform engineering has become. And like always, this term is going to get co-opted, and there's going to be semantic diffusion. And but there is a positive, I think there is a positive progression here, in that as it transforms from this, DevOps who still were fairly inwardly focused, they are taking a more of a service attitude towards things. So the platform engineer built into that is kind of the notion that you are building things for other people. So I wanted to see what have we learned about this stuff over the last 8 years or so. So one of the advantages I have, I guess, in my job is that I can go stick my nose in other people's business whenever I feel like it. So I go around and I was also part of the global service line that does this kind of stuff last year. So I made it my business to go and talk to as many people that had been actually doing platform engineering on the ground, to ask them what makes for a successful platform. What are the things, what have we learned, and where are we now? Well, here's one thing. We used to just talk about digital platforms as this whole amalgam of things. We found, and this is very simple, but people really like this breakdown. People find that because we talk about platforms, so we've found it generally helpful to use this taxonomy, where you have a customer experience platform, which would be your design systems and component libraries, stuff like that. A business capabilities platform, which would be APIs that you can draw on to recombine various business capabilities that you have and to generate new kind of revenue streams or new business models. And then underlying all that is the engineering platform, which is the stuff that helps the developers get stuff into production. And then data platforms, which is, you probably know what those are. So the thing that these all have in common is they have internal consumers, is we have to treat our colleagues as customers of this thing. And that should make their lives easier. It's all about empowering them. It's not about making the platform team's job easier. And this is just, we also have found it helpful to break down what an engineering platform is into these different planes, from things that the developers use, tools that the developers use, like version control, to automated compliance, very important, implementing the governance, scans, and attestations. The delivery plane, which is getting things into generally Kubernetes, building containers and orchestrating things. Observability, making sure everybody has a consistent way of doing observability, and security, access control, IAM, so on. Anyway, this is just so you know what I'm talking about, because I'm not going to go too much into the technical aspects, the deep technical aspects of building platforms. The other thing that's happened that has helped a lot is that it seems like 2023 is a year that team topologies actually became mainstream. Like people in banks and insurance companies are reorganizing or trying to restructure around team topologies. And team topologies, because of that, they quoted that quote from Evan Bottcher in the book, help to clarify what a platform is. So people, I think, defining what a platform team is, and it's really that team, how that team behaves, that defines a lot about what the platform is. I think that helps a lot to clarify. We can point to the book and say, this is an engineering platform, and this is what you should be doing as a platform team. So that's been really helpful. I'll refer to these, I know there's another interaction style, but I'll refer to these particular ones later on in the talk. So I asked all these people, what do you think makes it a platform project or endeavor successful? And I tried to distill all this and draw some themes out of that, and it kind of broke down in this way, right? It starts, first of all, so what happens a lot, the way platforms used to evolve, and still do to a large extent, is that you got a bunch of DevOps stuff. You have a DevOps team who is creating some tools, and they do this sort of in an ad hoc way. They don't, and they end up with a bunch of scripts and pipelines and infrastructure configuration code and things like that, and they make it available to developers, and then they start calling it a platform. There are some real problems with doing things that way. And you can avoid those problems by kind of doing this. First of all, starting the right foundations, creating the foundations before you begin your platform project. And then when you do start, engage and enlist the help from the right people and make sure that you're communicating and engaging correctly with the rest of the organization. And finally, operating, because one of the things that happens a lot is you get the sugar hit platform, which everybody gets really excited. We've got our digital platform, and here's going to make your life so much easier. And then you never hear from the platform team again. And it may make your life easier at first, but then as time goes on, it becomes more of a boat anchor, and it slows you down, and you run out of energy, and nobody really wants to use it anymore. So you have to operate the platform and evolve it over time. So I'm going to go through these one by one. The first thing, and fundamental, is engaging with the developers. If it's a product, you have to find out who your users are and what their pain points are. So we find it helpful to do these, to do interviews, to do contextual inquiry, just like a user experience person would do. Go sit down with developers, see how they do their work, understand how they're feeling about their job and how things are going throughout the day. Sometimes it's helpful to do workshops with function-specific, like a workshop with all the developers, and a workshop with all the testers, and a workshop with all the BAs, and something like that is often helpful as well. A really quick and easy way to get a lot of information, I should say at the outset, the point of this is to solve the problems that actually exist, and so many times people don't do that. That seems so trivial and obvious to say. You need to solve the problems that the developers actually have. But many, many times, it's just somebody else's idea of what you might need or what you should have, and it gets thrown out there. Surveys are a really quick and easy way to get information from developers. So it's a low effort, but it also, there are problems with surveys, right? It depends a lot on how you phrase things. I will have some more to say about surveys later on in the talk, but use them, it's great, but be careful. And then by far the most valuable tool is this value stream mapping. Is going through, sitting down with the team, spending some time, and going step by step. We use this template for doing it, and going step by step and understanding where the bottlenecks are and where the waste is in the path to production. So it's more than path production, it's really the developer experience from onboarding to the team to offboarding, which is also a critical step that gets overlooked often. So this yields a lot of good information and can tell you not only where the biggest bottleneck is that you want to address first, so it helps you to sequence and prioritize what you want to build into the platform when you start with that thinnest viable platform, but it also tells you what you might want to measure. So we'll get to measurements a lot later on, but this is a really helpful way to understand what metrics you might want to collect to tell you if your platform is being successful and to tell others if your platform is being successful. So the other thing is really important to understand what value you intend. And this also seems so obvious, but we haven't talked about this enough, right? If it's a product, if we're regarding this thing as a product, a fundamental thing about a product is it has to be profitable. It has to deliver some tangible value. And so often the platform projects start out with a lot of gusto, but then the people start asking, executives and CFOs start asking, what value is this thing returning? So it's really important to establish that, and what we found is that there's two ways that you can go about that. One is the kind of top-down, high-level business objectives. This is setting more abstract kind of goals, like how we need to be able to experiment faster, we need to get to market faster, those kinds of things. They're hard to measure, but they're inspiring, and they appeal a lot to sort of executives, And the other approach would be bottom-up cost modeling, which is, in today's world, it's really important to sell this to the CFO. So CFOs tend to, so you need to do both, right? You need to do this top-down, sort of high-level business objectives, but you also need to actually compute what value, how much is it going to cost me to build this thing, track how much it costs, how much have you invested in your cost of goods sold or your cost of services, and then what kind of return am I getting on that investment? And we have a spreadsheet that we use It's not perfect, but it's, you can put in all the data, like the team sizes, how frequently are you delivering now? So how many workloads are you delivering now? How many workloads do you intend to deliver over time? And what kind of improvement in that pace do you expect to get by investing in the platform? How big is the platform team? How much do platform engineers cost? So on and so on. So you put all that in a spreadsheet and it allows you to project when am I going to see a positive ROI on this investment? And it allows you also to track. It's helpful to track actuals against this and to be able to predict when you're going to see a positive cash flow on the value of your platform. So this is really helpful because CFOs speak spreadsheets. You can talk till you're blue in the face to a CFO that this is going to be really, you're going to see lots of great benefits from this. But until you show them a spreadsheet with the number, it's like a magic when you can put a spreadsheet in front of them. The other thing early on, so now we're getting into the engage and enlist part. So early on, it's really important to find the right team to help to onboard first onto the platform. So you need to start early on, before you have anything to give them to use. Start engaging, find the right team. So it has to be, you have to be, let's wait on that. You need to be, to pick the right people. So they need to be adventurous, experimenters, people that like to try new technology, and they also need to not be under tremendous amount of delivery pressure, because you're going to need the support of the product manager on this. So there's probably these product engineering teams, the streamlined teams are going to be under tremendous pressure usually to get features out. Nobody wants to take the time to onboard to the platform. So I've seen this happen over and over again, right? Nobody wants, the owner of the product says, no, you must get these features out. No, you can't have an iteration to do to get on board. I know that's going to make us faster later on. So you really need to engage those people, and you need to find a team that isn't under too much pressure to be your early adopters. And it really is important to give them face-to-face, hands-on mentoring and coaching in how to get on, because you only get one shot at it. If you're lucky, you'll get an iteration to do platform onboarding. And it's really important to get it right then, because you're never going to go, if you get the wrong patterns in the team integrating with the platform, if you do that, you're never going to get a chance to go back. This is going to be technical debt. And so it's really important to get it right the first time. And Pete Hodgson, he's an Excel worker. He calls this white glove onboarding. So it's, the platform team needs to kind of pivot back and forth between spending time writing code and building the platform services that are going to be offered, and then consulting. So it's pivoting between these two interaction modes of team topologies, from building X as a service to collaborating and spending time on the ground collaborating with people. So you kind of have this spiky, there's periods where you're doing intense consulting and there's periods where you're doing intense coding. But over time, as more and more teams onboard, you should probably not have to do that consulting less frequently, and you should need fewer people to do the development of the platform services. And then you need to share your progress. So one of the mistakes that's often made is that there isn't enough, we've established the value and the benefits the platform is going to bring, but we don't continually remind people that they're getting these benefits, right? So you need to be able to have metrics that tell you what success looks like in your platform, and you need to be able to make those metrics, to radiate those metrics and make them accessible and available to everyone. And you need to keep going out and talking to people about that. So the metrics you choose, this is the first, is critical, right? A lot of it's going to be driven by what you found in that value stream mapping. But these are some metrics that we have found to be generally helpful. Now, everybody likes to talk about DORA metrics. It's a bit of a trigger issue for me. So if you ask a question about DORA metrics, you might get a longer answer than you anticipated. DORA metrics were never meant to measure team performance. They were never meant to measure delivery, the delivery performance. They're meant to indicate a business's success based on the way the businesses behave. And that behavior is really the important thing. And it's at an operations level. Cycle time is the time from dev complete to when you get something into production. That's how Dora defines cycle time, not from that has nothing to do with the delivery team. Anyway, sorry, I've already talked too long about that. And it's also a lagging metric. It doesn't tell you how you're doing. You need metrics that are telling you what you're doing, how things are working in real time, so that you have an opportunity to go out and take action and improve those metrics. So this is I tried to arrange them, in terms of how lagging they are, how leading they are. So it's the things you want to really pay attention to are how many workloads are you deploying, what's your onboarding rate. NPS is really great. If you're measuring that, the time that people are waiting for things to build. Reuse, I'm not sure how you measure that, but you could think of it, but it is critical, right? Are we getting reuse of these? You could measure how your APIs are being accessed or how that documentation is being accessed. Number of support incidents. Anyway, I'm sure the slides will be distributed so you can see these metrics then. And then it's important to radiate those metrics, right? So there are lots of dashboarding tools available. You can do this in any number of ways. This was from John Lewis. It's an English company that it's actually this. We can talk about it because it's in a Medium post. It's hard to get actual examples because organizations are usually reluctant to make public, their platforms. Zalando's one company that you can see a lot of stuff online if you go and look at the experience as a European retailer. But this came from a Backstage portal, right? So this is Backstage, very popular, and I'm sure you're all aware, as a developer portal, but it's really important to remember that implementing Backstage is not the platform. Many people get Backstage, they implement a software catalog in Backstage, they say, okay, it's the platform. That's not the platform. The platform is not the portal. The portal is just a window into the platform that gives you access to the services. It tells you something about what's happening with those services. Backstage is great, but that's only the veneer on top of the real work, which is in the planning, understanding what to offer, building the services that the platform offers. Another really critical, and you may have noticed that none of this is technical, right? When I started this investigation, I was expecting to get a lot of stuff about Kubernetes operators, are you doing GitOps in your platform? How are you managing fleets of Kubernetes clusters and all this kind of stuff, it's great, but we know how to do that stuff. Like each of those, that technology is never the problem. It's really getting the organizational support and the support of the people that are going to be in the consumers of the platform. And one of the critical things is in how this thing gets funded. So this is a question I often get from the managers in the audience is what is the funding model? And it's a complicated subject, right? And there are many different ways that you could think of funding these things. But these are two that are very common, and I'm just doing a time check. I think we'll have time to talk about the future. It's good. In the first case, we have the platform team is part of a larger engineering group. So this is a very common situation. You have a CXO of tech, and somehow, and then it has many tech functions, one of which is engineering. Maybe another is security or operations or something. So this engineering team has many product teams within it, and one of those could be the platform team. The platform team sits under the same structure. This is problematic because the product owners always feel like they're getting taxed for the platform because they can see that they can see what the engineering budget is, they can see what portion they're getting of it, and they can see a portion going to the platform, which does not give them it doesn't help them immediately deliver features quickly, because remember, the product owner is a really important set of stakeholders to engage. But it often leads to conflict, what happens is the platform team ends up getting starved. A much better model is the one on the right, which is where the sponsorship and the funding comes directly from the tech exec. So in this case, the engineering, you're not taxing the engineering budget to build the platform. It also has the executive sponsorship, and it sends a message that this is important work and we need to support it. So this is a much more successful way to fund the platform. In the end, the money's the same, right? It all comes out of the same operational or capital expenses, but it's the way that people see it and the level of sponsorship that it receives that's really critical. And then, as you're operating the platform over time, to avoid that sugar hit platform, you must continuously take in a backlog of new features. And you could get that backlog from any number of places, right? It could come from your SREs, it could come from developers, of course, it could come from the business, or it could come from the executives that need, maybe we need some compliance features built into the platform or something like that. Or maybe we need to be able to measure conversion rates or something. So it's important to continuously have a backlog that you are continuously prioritizing, and to be able to make this transparent, to make this process transparent to the rest of the organization, so that people can see what's happened to their feature requests. And one way that we found one successful way to prioritize, because it's difficult to manage these things. Sometimes the business wants things, sometimes the developers want things, is to look at them and rank them, the incoming requests, in terms of the value to the business and the value to the teams. And this is just real simple quadrants. If it's valuable to both, obviously that's your top priority, right? If it's valuable to neither, then don't do them at all, probably just ignore it. If it's valuable to the business but not to the delivery teams, then you're going to have to sell it to the delivery teams. You're going to have to use that engagement, use the evangelists that you created when you onboarded that first team, when you engaged with and made that first team feel like they were part of the platform. You're going to have to get them to buy into this feature. And if it's the opposite, if it's valuable to delivery teams and not so much to the business, then you need to make sure that it's reflected, that the benefits are reflected in the metrics that you're radiating and advertising about the platform. Cool. I have 10 minutes to talk about the future. So, where do we go from here? Again, I talk to a lot of people to get their opinions, and also I'm engaged in a lot of, as my job, I'm engaged in a lot of sort of looking ahead and thinking about what skills do we need to be developing, and where is technology going, and I'm just curious. So I have I'm going to stick my neck out and say, I think we're going to make an evolutionary leap. I think this whole field of platform engineering is going to undergo some change, which is, you can expect that to happen in any case. And I think these three things are what I see being talked about right now. These are the three things that are really kind of different that I see people, there's new products on the market, or there's businesses that are concerned about these things. The first is, I call instrumented excellence, this field of this problem of measuring developer productivity or measuring engineering effectiveness. And I'm sure you are all aware that this is a big topic, and that in these times where people are cutting budgets and everything, there's a big push to be able to show measurable improvement in engineering performance. So I think that's going to I think the way that that's being done is critical. And I think that we need a ubiquitous language to talk about platform things. Right now, it's every company has their own way of doing platforms. It's mostly, there's a few standards out there, but I think things are going to become much more standardized around a few approaches. And then finally, this augmented, connected developer experience. I think that AI, and I couldn't leave that out, is going to have a big impact on this whole field of building engineering platforms, of building platforms, or doing software delivery in general. I could talk for another hour about that, but let's just briefly talk about each of these. There's a lot of interest in measurements, in measuring developer productivity when this McKinsey article came out. I'm sure some of you saw this. It caused a lot of controversy. We've, at ThoughtWorks, have talked about this for years. Martin Fowler's written about it and everything. And our stance is that activity is not a good indication of effectiveness, right? That you can measure a developer's output, but that's not really indicative of the business value that's being created by developing software. But at the same time, we know we can feel, oh, by the way, there's a good response to that article. If you want, Gergely Oros and Kent Beck wrote a really good response to that McKinsey article, so I'd recommend reading that. What we do know is where waste occurs. So it's there's Sierra Jaspin is a developer productivity engineer at Google and has written a lot about this stuff. I think that, does this work? That's just a Google paper. There's been a lot of research in this area. There's the Microsoft Developer Velocity Lab that Nicole Forsgren from Dora started at Microsoft. They produced these papers about developer experience. You've probably seen these, right? The DevX metrics. So what these measure is waste. How much waste is happening? We don't know really how to measure output, but we can find places where we can improve the developer experience and eliminate interruptions to flow. And a lot of this, that's what it comes down to. It's like you can be more productive, you can feel more productive, your perceived productivity is greater if you can get in a state of flow. And fortunately, there's been a lot of the big internet companies and these other have been doing empirical research on this. Yes, so you can't measure productivity directly, but you can eliminate waste. So I really think the DevX folks are on the right track. And I have no stake in this company, DX, but I think it's a really innovative product. And now we're coming back to developer surveys. So they went and started, those folks from the Developer Velocity Lab and others started this company, DX. And they have a product, I think it's called DevX 360, although they keep changing the name. And what it does is it presents surveys to developers in a very unobtrusive way. And it measures, they have determined, these are the 25 things we need to look at in order to understand if developers are being productive or not. So they're professional researchers. They've managed to reduce the set of questions down to just the key ones that they know are going to actually have an impact on the productivity in the long run. So it's really interesting. We're experimenting with this product, and we're actually using it with some internal teams in North America, and a lot of customers are showing interest in it for us. But when we do those developer surveys in a form-based, spreadsheet-based way that I showed you before, we usually get like a less than 20% response rate. The experience with DX is like in the 90s, because they present they'll just pop up a question in Slack randomly, and this is a much better way to approach it. You don't get that survey fatigue. You're making sure that you're not presenting the same question to the same developer or too many questions to any one developer. Yeah, I think the way you do surveys are great source of information, but it's the way you do them is really important. You have to word things correctly. You have to worry about if your audience doesn't use English as a first language. There's a lot of potential ways to screw up your surveys. In fact, this whole field of metrics is really easy to screw up. A lot of people are measuring things that they don't know how they can actually improve. And there are some folks, one of the reasons I'm so enthusiastic about DX is that they're statisticians. They're people who understand how do you measure things in a statistically significant way that have impact on the things that you're trying to improve. So this is some questions you should ask yourself if you are measuring things. First of all, do you have a baseline? Do you know what normal is at all for that metric? Do you understand how that varies naturally? Do you know how much the variation in that metric is that just for no reason at all? There's going to be statistical quantity. There's going to be some noise in it. Is it a single metric? Any single metric, if you're using that, is going to be abused and gamed. So doing this wrong can be really harmful. So it's really important to have a composite metric. You need to measure several things. It's much more difficult to game those things. Do you know what failure looks like? Do you know what success looks like? Do you know what your target is? Do you know what what good looks like for this metric? Likewise, do you know what really bad looks like? You're just measuring it and, oh, it's better this month than it was last month. It doesn't really tell you that much if you haven't fully modeled these things. And then if you're not going to action anything from the metric, if you don't know what actions you're going to take, if it strays outside the acceptable range, then why bother to measure it at all, right? But so many times people are measuring things and they're not actually doing these things. This is what we call fully modeled metrics. So you want to take a more rigorous scientific attitude, I guess, towards your metrics. I'm going to run out of time, and I want to talk about AI. The next thing I was going to talk about was some of these platform orchestration tools. Take a look at Kratix. It's really very Kubernetes-centric. I kind of like the open application model as a standardized way to talk about the characteristics that the things that a platform can offer. And I think where we need to get to is a standard for describing the contract that a platform offers, and a way for developers then to submit configuration information that conforms to that standard. So we need a ubiquitous language, and there are a few products that offer that right now. Okay, last thing, I want to get a little philosophical. One of my colleagues, my counterpart in China, really brilliant, creative guy, always has a different slant on things. And he says a lot these days that software is not a set of instructions for a computer. What we really need to look at software as a communication medium. When you're writing code, you're not writing it for the computer, you're writing it for other people, and it's a distillation of the knowledge that you've gained. And so software development is really the act of knowledge engineering. It's a way of gathering information, gathering knowledge, using your knowledge about the world, using tacit knowledge and what you learn from the business, and describing in very precise terms what the business is, in precise terms that other people can understand. I mean, domain modeling is a big part of this. So it's really, building software isn't just creating some code and then the product is the code. The product is the understanding and the way that we've structured the knowledge about the business. One way to look at platforms is this fine, is that platforms offer this abstraction, and we kind of have this layered abstraction, right? So we have all these things that the developers have to worry about that we want to hide basically from them. We don't want them, so we create abstractions that only expose as much of that as they need to know about, because our heads are small and we can only get so much into them at any one time. So we have these concise abstractions that help us reason about the services that we want to use in the business. And so another way to look at it, though, is there's this thing, call it the engineering platform, or just call it the developer platform, the developer experience platform, is a way to interact with all of this knowledge that's out there in the business. All your code, your architecture, your infrastructure, all of these things, you need to be able to collaboratively with your teammates build knowledge, build additional knowledge, and make that in turn available and grow this knowledge base. So in a way, it's kind of this, if we didn't need to have those distillations into abstractions, we wouldn't be thinking about the platform, I don't think, in the same terms. this looks a lot like a large language model. And I think that's where the world is going. And I think this is where software delivery in general is going to go. There's a couple of products that have capitalized on this, right? These are basically they're backed up chat ops with large language models. So one of prompt ops and Kubia, these are the two big ones, right? And they're ways that relieve the platform team of a lot of burden of answering questions and stuff like that. And you can say, I feel like, I want to deploy my application, and then it'll come back and say, it sounds like you want to deploy an application. Do you want to go into staging, or do you want to go into production? And it can lead you through with unstructured natural language what you need to do to get those things. So much like chat ops, but you don't have to know specific commands, and you don't have to know where to find things, and so on. At ThoughtWorks, I'll leave you with this. We want to take this a step further. We have this kind of experimental thing that we're working with that is a window into the large language model of your choice. That is a collaborative environment for teams to work within. So, up here, you may be doing analysis. It's a great way to do domain-driven design. You may be doing coding and architecture. You may be doing a great way to write tests and generate test data. And then all the things that you gather, the knowledge that you create in doing this goes back into the knowledge repository and can be used to respond to future prompts. And then there's various, so basically it's a set of prompts. There's not a lot of detail to or complexity to it. It's a bunch of prompts that we found work really well when combined with things like knowledge of your architecture, your frameworks, your code, your infrastructure, and so on. And so there's a bunch of separate tasks and this helps a lot with onboarding. It helps a lot with teams with collaborating asynchronously. And when a new developer starts, there is all this accumulated knowledge they can just query about. This is where forget Copilot. Copilot's great. We are using Copilot absolutely. I think everybody should if it's safe for you and you're comfortable with it. But the big improvements in productivity in software engineering are going to take place here. This is just an example of failure analysis. This is one of the tasks that you can do. I uploaded, this was a PNG of it's real small, I'm sorry, but I didn't have time to generate a video, which a screencast would do this better. But this is just a AWS network diagram in PNG form. And I gave it a little bit of prompt here, and it takes that in and then says, okay, what are the various ways that this thing can fail? We use this for threat modeling as well. That's a real, the LLM will prompt you with, what sort of escalation of privilege could happen at various junctures if it knows about the architecture. So I think this is pretty cool, and I think it represents a whole different approach to software engineering, and I think it's where we're going to see the most improvements in efficiency. The platform is just one aspect of it. The platform is one enabler, but this isn't just about the platform. It's about the whole collaborative experience of the team.